more so affirming the provision of the essential obligation of government proclaimed in the 1999 Constitution of Nigeria. In Chapter 2 of that Constitution, which speaks to the fundamental objective and directive principles of state policy, it is declared that the security and welfare of the people of Nigeria shall be the primary purpose of government. As such, the business of the state can be observed as being without doubt or contradiction very, very serious business. Otherwise, any government that fails to rise up to the obligation of delivering human security loses its reasoned depth and legitimacy. As an open administration, we were the first state in Nigeria to demystify the bogey of governmental insularity by passing the Freedom of Information Law 2011, and on the 12th of April 2012, making the information of government to be readily available and publicly published. The FOI legislation, a domestication of National Freedom of Information Bill that was forwarded by the State Parliament to the State Parliament as an executive bill, provides for the free access of public records, while also protecting certain public officers from the adverse consequences of disclosing certain kinds of information without due authorization. This, coupled with the assent of the State Fiscal Responsibility Bill into law, and the public declaration of my assets and those of my deputies and aides, and to the best of my knowledge, I think I'm the only governor that has done that in this current dispensation, has signaled our government's commitment to the reinstatement of a climate of transparency in public office, which has restored and increased the public's confidence in our administration. A vital aspect of openness that we have inserted into the business of government in our state pertains to the process of participatory governance, in which critical stakeholders across the length and breadth of Ekiti cities, towns and communities, civil servants, artisans, market women, educators, private sector professionals, farmers, and the regular folk are carried along in the making of decisions that determine their welfare and affect their lives. They are actively incorporated into the setting of agenda for governance in terms of identification and projection of their developmental choices and preferences. Rather than past approaches in which the conception and implementation of budgets were top-down affairs involving officials, policymakers, experts, who drew up the projects and funding priorities of government and foisted this on the public, our administration brought the people of Ekiti into the heart of budget making in the latter part of 2011 in preparation for the 2012 budget. We met up with them in the various rural, urban, peri-urban communities through town hall and village square meetings, asking them for 3 top priorities in their community to be included in the budgeting process. This formed a critical part of our 2012 budget. Tomorrow, I start the process again in Ekiti, going around the towns and villages for the input of our people into 2013 budget. With the identified needs and concerns, we were able to put together a perfect people's budget for 2012. And with the contributions to the composition of the current budget of the state, we have not only been able to co-generate a realistic, people-driven financial plan, but also secure the collaborative ownership of the developmental process. As a major flank of participatory governance and operation of an open government at this juncture in history, when the necessity of harnessing information for greater productivity has become an essential feature of our reality, we have taken on the notion of e-governance very, very boldly. And further to the launching of our digital online channels in February 2012, we responded to the need for increasing transparency in governance by uploading the 2012 budget of Ekiti State on our website, thereby becoming the first state in the country to have its full budget located on the internet for public consumption and contemplation. More so, as a demonstration of the creed of openness that we have proclaimed and are totally committed to, our administration is ensuring that all the contracts being vetted by the government are continuously uploaded on the state's website. Still, we're working on creating a tender portal that will be a real-time searchable archive for past, present, and future government procurement tenders. In addition, we're poised on activating an online budget tracking system soon, through which the degrees of the implementation of our financial plans and activities can be publicly followed. While the legislative bills that have been passed into law in the state are already domiciled on the website, we have sought to remove the usual red tapeism associated with government by allowing for real-time public access to our administration, as the official addresses, email and phone numbers of all the members of the Ekiti State Executive Council are published on the Ekiti State website. Perhaps this contributed to our choice as the most ICT compliant state in the country, 2012. At this juncture, I hope you would agree with me that the business of state is extremely serious business, and it is one in which the best ethos of business practices are brought into the workings of government, which are largely about guaranteeing the finest of customer service delivery to the people, however, without the profit motive as its driving force. Yes, the business of government is about the continuous creation of value in society, but this has to be principally in sync with providing for the general welfare of people in society. The old paradigm of public governance in Nigeria could be considered as having failed mainly due to its lack of ensuring effective service delivery to people, which has been consequent upon the challenges that hindered successive governments and administrations in our country. Yet the newer paradigm of governance, being operationalized in Ekiti State under the direction and watch of our administration, takes cognizance of the responsibility of government to enhance the efficacy of the available pool of resources, material and human, to deliver on robust services for the good of the people. Also, in widening the human safety net, our administration has not only increased the generation of internal revenue, but we have also plowed the resources back into the welfare of our people, particularly the vulnerable. We somewhat informed the evolution of our social security scheme, the first of its kind in this part of Africa, West Africa, that is responsive to the care of elderly citizens who are incapable of surviving properly without the intervention of a support structure from government. Through this plan, a stipend of 5,000 naira per individual is granted to the elderly folk above the age of 65 who are demonstrably unable to financially care for themselves, and these, along with the free health services that are equally available to them, are administered without recourse to party affiliation or political following. Over 20,000 elderly people who are not on pension, and we do have quite a number of people on pension in Ekiti because we are educated, as you know, are currently benefiting from this scheme. With the understanding of the seriousness of the business of government, we have pioneered and driven the process of reformation of the civil service in line with what I said earlier about the importance of the bureaucracy, which we realize has been the engine room of the government. For the first time, the head of service was chosen via an examination in Ekiti. You do not become a permanent secretary if you do not go through an examination. And in all of the other sectors of our state bureaucracy, this has increasingly been what is in practice. I'm sure many of you have read about Ekiti teachers and the problems I have with them over examination, but we're not relenting. If you're not prepared to take our development assessment examination, you're not fit to teach in our public schools. In addition, our administration has been involved in the enterprise development of young people by equipping them with trainings and skills, such as in the youth commercial agriculture development, that would enable the individual survivor and assist them in transcending an entitlement mentality or the erroneous conviction that only white-collar jobs, professions, are worthy of career pursuit. Distinguished faculty, students, ladies and gentlemen, let me conclude this lecture by going back to the issue I mentioned earlier. That is, the fundamental question that needs to be addressed in our collective wish for the creation of a new paradigm of public governance in the whole of Nigeria. All that I've enumerated above are critical in the bid to make the business of state a serious business. But let me say, with all sense of responsibility, that all of these, as important as they are secondary issues, or what I have described as epiphenomena. We should do them also as to ensure good governance. But we cannot create a new paradigm for sustainable and all-encompassing public governance in Nigeria without returning to the fundamental basics. Until and unless we recompose the Nigerian state and make it derive its originary consent and legitimacy from the people, then we labor in vain about public governance. It is only after we have settled the fundamental issues that we can begin to address anew the pressing issues of public governance. Contrary to the pretensions of neoliberal economists, without a modern state, there cannot be an economy or society. Therefore, before public governance, there must be a modern state in the real sense. A predatory state cannot have proper public governance. Those in power at the center and some members of the political elite may deceive themselves, but the truth is that Nigeria is in a state of perplexity. Whether you consider the almost absolute lack of vision and mission at the center, or you reflect upon the rationale and the challenges of those who insist that unless and until Nigeria becomes a theocracy, there shall be blood and tears unlimited, whether you look towards the Niger Delta, where despite the amnesty and the industry of graft and greed that it has reproduced, there is a continuous and bloody demand for justice and equity. Or you examine the endless pretext for ethnic strife and bloodletting between the so-called indigenous people and the settlers in the Middle Belt, whether you scrutinize the regular apocalyptic predictions of highly regarded Nigerians about the fate of the country. And when you read The Guardian, Disney, and all the newspapers yesterday, you will see a plethora of such predictions. You cannot but come to the conclusion that Nigeria needs to be recreated and restructured. This brings me to the question of the political, which I raised earlier. In less than 2 years, we will celebrate the centenary of the amalgamation. I don't know whether it's going to be a celebration or whether it even calls for celebration or commiseration. Whatever it is, there are millions of our compatriots who think that the marriage of the two protectorates by the British was a happy marriage. There are also millions who are vehement in their dissension. However, I am convinced that the majority of Nigerians will want to remain Nigerians if there is a guarantee that the Nigerian state will become a state indeed, one whose very reason of existence is the protection and projection of the common interest of its citizens. But they also know that this cannot happen unless and until they count as citizens, not subjects. They can only count as citizens if their original consent is sought about the composition of the Nigerian state, and if there is a guarantee that their consent will be regularly sought about the people who will compose the government within that state. Distinguished faculty members, students, guests, ladies and gentlemen, I've taken what you may regard as a roundabout way by speaking to the surface of the issues, even though critical, and then returning to the fundamentals. You will all recall a famous exchange between two of our founding fathers. One asked that we should forget our differences to be able to build a strong and united country, while the other insisted that we cannot build a united and strong country without recognizing our differences. The truth about how to save Nigeria and create a new paradigm for public governance lies between the two statements. Let me end by reminding us of a famous statement by Ernst Renan, who is one of the most cited authors about the idea of a nation. Renan stated that now the essence of a nation is that the people have many things in common, but have also forgotten much together. This is also true of the modern nation state. Whether Nigerians will continue in perpetuity to recognize their differences or forget them forever must be left to the collective decision of Nigerians. The place to start is to have a national talk shop where every interest, every aspiration, and every inspiration concerning how to create a great country, a proud people, will be represented and debated. This is how to guarantee the twin purpose of the Peace of Westphalia, which consolidated the idea of the modern nation state, lasting peace and common good. That is the most serious business that this generation confronts. That is the most serious business that we all must tackle. I thank you.
Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it seems to me that the governor has brought the passion to feature the government in the state into this lecture. And what we have had is engagement itself now. And here, Your Excellency, we want to know if your colleagues have actually informed you reliably. So, to anchor this section, which is interaction, I'd like to invite Mr. Bayero Agabi, who is the president of the London Association, to do that. For a moment, and go into the presentation of the book, which is here, under the direction of Mr. Richard Ikebe. So I'm going to invite.
Now, we've said this over and over again. The governor is on a very tight schedule today. I have my 50-page lecture here. No, I will bear and Chilo are going to take a couple of minutes each for what we need to say. Ekiti State is totally. That's definitely. Well, those of you who are on Twitter, you know what that means. And the governor is also on Facebook. About this time last year, for the postgraduate diploma in journalism, initially the entire postgraduate diploma program was centered around journalism because we were not getting enough people into our journalism classes. That was then known as 234 Next. But as it happened, the number of people that registered for that course were only a third of the other streams, because we had journalism, core journalism, we had community development, community relations, and then we had digital media. But the one that was least subscribed, as you can expect, was journalism. Because the scholarship and research into areas of journalism has greatly diminished. And Mr. Governor, sir, you were a reporter once, a writer once, and obviously from what we have heard from you today, you are still obviously a very good writer. And one of the things that we have suffered from as a nation is the fact that we have not kept faith with our past. I'm glad that Mr. Kayode is here. The research is very limited indeed. And the more I read the history of modern Nigeria, I find out that it is more the Nigerian state that became an independent state. The media was already 55 years old when the famed amalgamation took place in 1914. So the media, the Nigerian press, is far, far older than the history of Nigeria. If you talk about Azikiwe, if you talk about Awolowo, if you talk about Jakonde, if you talk about the BC Onabanjo, the SL Akitolas, the Ajuluchukus, all of these people were journalists who were famous first as journalists before they were recruited into government. In fact, it was the fame they had as journalists that seemed to have qualified them because, of course, the nation lacked heroes. So the people that were visible from which they could draw were immediately were journalists who were available, who had been the center stage. And so, sir, the need to research, the need to truly research, to do authentic research, is absolutely important now because we need our past to understand our present to plan for the future. And I'm also happy that Mr. Tony Epele is in the house. Mr. Tony Epele is the son of the first director, the professional director in the Ministry of Information in the 60s, that Mr. Tony Epele right there. Who will take very active interest in research. And so when we started the class last year, I invited my students. There were just 8 of them. We started as 9, and then one of us dropped out. Then Taiwo Bay had started an online discussion, conversation, Prof calls it, that took 3 months. And I invited them to look through all the strands of that discussion, that conversation. And what came out was very, very outstanding. We found out we had over 100 pages of conversation. And the more I read it, the more I knew that we shouldn't let that conversation just be momentary. We wanted to capture it in history. Some of the students are here today. Could you please stand up, Paul? Obiageli and Ajala, these are some of the students today. Now, Ajala, while we were in the class, got hijacked by the governor, the governor's office, and she's manning some of the e-platform expressions of the Ekiti State government right now. Thank you very much. And so we are determined, sir, that research is paramount to help us to move forward. We have published this little book. I want to appeal to you, I want to beg you that we need, I'm doing it in a very plain way now so that nobody will say I didn't beg. Because really, we need to do research into our past. 2 years ago, Anthony Nahoro died, a foremost journalist, and he died in his library. Earlier this year, we lost Sheikh Mushola. I'm not sure how much of him was captured. We lost Bisi Onabanjo shortly after he came out of government. An entire history that Jakonde is old, is in his 80s. We need to capture our past, sir. And I will appeal to you, if there is any support you can give to the Center for Leadership in Journalism, we will appreciate it. Give me a hand now.
Last night. If Richard had told me last night, I probably would have also brought the private jets. The governor will not be in the rush. Nice to have you after so many years. Don't mind if he says I'm a senior. Don't mind it. Today, if I'm not going to greet anybody else here, I would greet someone, my teacher, my former teacher, and he said there is no more, there is not, if I wear 20 agbadas, he was still my teacher. That was no very low. This story before. But let me assure you that it will be sweeter in my mouth. Proud to what has now become known as Nigeria's GSM revolution, a telecoms company in South Africa sends scouts to Nigeria to find out everything about the people of Nigeria, whether they live on trees and stuff like that. As it were, they didn't find us living on trees. In fact, they found fewer trees and more palatial mansions and skyscrapers. And they also found something else, which was more relevant to their purpose. Listen, that Nigerians can talk. Oh, they can talk in that country. Gosh, one of the scouts. Imagine two people on the balconies of adjoining houses asking each other during a rainfall, can you see the rain? I can translate that to you back. So Rojo, and they are looking at it. So we talk about everything the eyes see or don't see. Just bring it on, we talk about it. One minister was quoted as saying that our beloved president brought Facebook to Nigeria. I want to declare today that LinkedIn.com was also created for Nigeria. How do I know? I've seen his banner that says, have you got anything to say? Join a group and start your conversation. So on 29 January 2011, I created the Everything Journalism group on LinkedIn.com because there's quite a lot to say on and about journalism, particularly in Nigerian variety. And dear friends, we've been talking. The book, Future Tense, Traverse of Nigerian Journalism in the Digital Age, is the harvest of the thoughts and expressions of no fewer than 47 members of the Everything Journalism group, which as of this morning has 682 members. It will seem that we talked well, otherwise there would have been no inspiration for this book. The joy will be when we talked, what we talked about will also lead to a revolution in the Nigerian media industry, just as the GSM revolution. Anyhow, we shall keep talking. I invite you all to join Everything Journalism group. Join the conversation today or start a new one. Thank you for listening. My name is Theo.
Good morning. Good morning, invited guests and students. So my job is to do a review of Future Tense. I have 5 minutes to do that. To start off, for purpose of full disclosure, I'm not a disinterested party in this. I was featured editor at Next for 2 years. This book is many things. It's bare parlor gisting, and that's not to use it in an interrogatory manner, but only to talk about how much opinion it contains. It's a business manual, it's a journalism history text, a social media experiment, media ethics handbook, a good on it, and most importantly, it's the story of Nigeria, a country that is adept at plumbing the depths of dysfunction. I'll touch on some of those things I've mentioned one by one. There's a quote here by Professor Kayode, quoting Cecil King, who was a media mogul in his time, the Murdoch of his era. He said of Dr. Nnamdi Azikiwe, Dr. Zik was an excellent journalist, hampered by the lack of an adequate manager. That, I think, is a brilliant summary of many of the icons of our media landscape today. There are sections of this book that are on themes like circulation, distribution, revenue streams, business models. So in that sense, it's a business manual for people who want to get into the media industry. It's a history of journalism as well. One of the commentators, Ken Tadeflema, talks about Nigerian media and the major epochs, the 60s or the period just before and after independence, the 80s and 90s, the battle against dictatorships, and today. This book is also a good on it. I'm quoting Professor Kayode again. What killed 234 Next? Was it arrogance or overconfidence? Poor planning or poor business management skills? Fighting government and the establishment? Was the idea itself out of sync, out of touch, and out of place? Many people have many reasons why they think the paper failed. And most fascinatingly, I think this book stands out as a social media experiment. In that sense, it is not new. 2 years ago, somebody who we all know well published, in quotes, a similar book. My friends and I, Conversations on Policy and Governance via Facebook. In a review of that book by Dr. Ibn Abati, he said the book is a documentation of conversations between President Goodluck Jonathan and Nigerian citizens on Facebook. In a similar manner, this book is a documentation of conversations amongst journalists this time, and on LinkedIn, not Facebook. There's one of the pages that lists 40 contributors, 8 students, and 3 editors. And I find that fascinating as well, because in that it tells us how much this is a social media experiment. That we have a book that is made up of, it has its contributors, it has a bunch of people who came together to gather to use it as sort of a class text, and it has a set of editors. Finally, this book is a barometer of the state of the media, not only in Nigeria but across the world. As the title implies, future tense. We're at what I would consider a tense moment in the media landscape. I'm again going to quote Professor Kayode. He called next a confrontation with change. Late in time and ahead of time. When you consider where Nigeria's media ought to be, next was late. However, considering where we are, next was way too far ahead. It is indeed a tense moment. We are at crossroads in Nigerian journalism. Next came in with a lot of vision. I will quote Gayle Oloje, the publisher, in an interview that is produced in this book. He talked about building a 21st and 22nd century news organization. We're only dealing with what's next. We're looking into the future. He talked about making judgments or making decisions according to the best judgment of the editors. Today, next is no more. There's some hope, of course, that next will come back. As the final section of this book, which is the comments on LinkedIn, I'm going to quickly just quote what the conversation is between Yomi Omokweja and Tony Akyosho. We should all watch out for Next to come back as a fully digital offering in 2012, with a focus on quality and on a premium platform rather than mass production. Tony Akyosho says, "Is that official, Yomi?" Yomi Omokweja laughs, "Ha ha ha, Uncle T, nothing is official yet. But you agree with me that Next Dream and Go is too important to die just yet." And that is where we are today. But we should also not forget that it's not just Next. In the time since Next has died, NN24 has also gone the same way. November last year, I think I've shared this at this point, I interviewed with NN24 to be news editor. Not knowing that I was interviewing with an organization that was in the final stages of its lifespan. Media businesses, High TV, for example, I mean, it's not a core journalistic, but it's a media content organization, has also fallen. So it's not just about Next. And I suspect that even some of the newspapers and the media organizations that survive today are actually dead. So, again, from Professor Kayode, whose essay, which is in the appendix of the book, is something I must highlight as one of the finest bits of this book. Are our media prepared for today's change? Are they preparing? Are we equipped? Do we have what it takes? Do we understand the issues that change is generating and dimensions of the change required? Are we building the future still on old platforms? Do we understand the nature of the new beast? Do we have a strategy for engaging the new future? It's all about questions. Future tense will not give you all the answers, but hopefully it will kickstart a debate, a conversation that will define and determine the future of journalism in Nigeria. Thank you.
Well, and hopefully it's my ideological lens. I think this impressive work of history, record, and journalism speaks to the Nigerian condition as well. There is a lot of parallels that we can draw from the lecture that I just gave about the place of leadership and the importance of having an organization that functions, even in newspaper publishing and the media world in general. I would reluctantly, for the first time in public, admit that I was part of the Nest story too. I was an investor in the Nest newspaper called Dilolo. That is somebody I respect greatly and worked with in my years in exile. So I followed closely what happened and found it a tragic experience. But I also believe that, as Tolu just said, the next 2, 3, 4 next is bound to rise again in one form or another, in a way that I hope is much more sustainable.
That's official.
I would. I saw draft form of this book, and as you would have noticed, I contributed a foreword to it. And I was quite impressed with the conversations. I think the conversation must continue. My boy is denying that he's my senior now. I guess he's allowing that superficial status and honorifics to get in the way of the truth. I am proud to present this publication. Publication that has been put together by the 8 students, the lecturers, as well as those who were involved in that LinkedIn conversation themselves. Future Tense, Travels of Nest, and Nigerian Journalism in the Digital Age. I'm glad that this is still happening, because this is something that has become so rare in academia these days. Publishing material that is peer-reviewed, material that can stand the test of scrutiny outside of the beer parlor. I don't consider this beer parlor publication in any sense. And it's not, when you look at the quality, it's not one of those backroom volume 1, number 1 journals that are used for A&P. Those who go through A&P know what I'm talking about. It's not an appointment and promotion publication that will be dumped immediately after you get to the next ladder, which is one of the terrible situations we find ourselves in Nigeria, a country of many VCs without CVs. Having said all of that, don't let me fall back into my world of academia. I'm a politician now. I'm not supposed to be saying these things. I present this book to the eternal support of the work that has been done by Nest particularly, but by the media for this country in general. And I'm glad that Richard referred to the role that has been played by excellent journalists who moved on to public office. I hope that I will register in that group as someone who has represented journalism and the media well, when I get out of this current assignment that I'm occupying. So, on behalf of myself, I would like to present this book by purchasing copies, not just for students here, but also in journalism schools and public policy schools across the country. I don't know how many that would be. And also for my own colleagues in the Ekiti State House of Assembly. They need such information to do a much better job of the work they are currently doing. And as for support to the center, I would be delighted to do that. I belong to academia. It's my first tradition. I don't want to jump out of it in a hurry. I may find myself here sometime in the future as a member of faculty. So to that extent, I will communicate to the dean and to the leadership the support that I'll be happy to render to the center. Thank you, God bless. And I apologize again that I have to take leave. It's because of all these complicated responsibilities that I'm saddled with.
If you have any other questions, please be outstanding. Okay?
Your Excellency, we've come a long way. I remember we are 6 years ago. Now, my question to you, sir, is this. You have said so many things lovely, and I cherish what I've come about. The one question, or rather a concern, Your Excellency. Recently, you said something when some opposition were asking you about a foreign trip. And you did say that all your trips you have been sponsoring yourself. Your Excellency, you just told us today that when you got into power, you internally generated revenue of 109, and you have now raised it up to 600. So what has been done to spend your personal money without taking people for foreign investment is a concern to me, Your
Excellency, I'm a junior. High school 1988.
I mean?
High school 1988.
Oh, Oxford.
Now,
You have a name?
Tunde Omoji. Tunde Omoji. Now my question, sir. I am an economist. A transport economist. So
Transport economist.
yes. So I'm familiar with infrastructure, development, and welfare. The question is, I want to pick on education. You have done a lot. We are proud of you. And we know you have so many things. But what about this on the cost of government?
Cost of government.
Yes. Is government really able to cater for this aspect of the social life of our people adequately as they should? If not, I believe from every bad situation there is some element of from every bad there is some good. People who have been abandoned years past have kind of taken they have taken it upon themselves to go out to the question is, I feel our people can still afford to do a little to contribute to the cost of government, to provide better and qualitative education than the government can do completely free, which is like over-delivering themselves. And this area we do.
At the stage where we are celebrating 50%, we don't actually know if we are celebrating or not.
Can you come out this way?
Step.
We're celebrating the 52nd independence anniversary. But we're talking about the business of governance in Nigeria. Of course, a lot of people have faulted the style of democracy. A lot of people have said federalism, blah, and all of this. And I have a feeling, this feeling inside of me, that if a lot of people have faulted our democracy, of course we know down within us that our democracy, there's still an identity of craziness within it. This is in a lot of sense that affected the business of governance. From your own standpoint, You said all of these things. How far do you think this can go? If you leave now, what happens to continuity?
Okay, please.
My name is Francisca and I report technology on AIT. My question, sir, is this. We all keep talking about a new order. Public office holders say that leaders, a lot of, I'm sorry to say, you, Your Excellency, I will listen to Governor Rotimi Amechi too, spoke about the new order. But what I discovered is this. We still talk about development, leaving out technology. I did hear you mention, computers to secondary school students and all of that. But apart from giving these people computers, what about empowering them with IT skills? You mentioned giving the provision for the elderly in your place. What about using technology to really drive development? A lot of our leaders don't seem to look this way. We're talking about a new global order where technology is no longer separated from any aspect of human endeavors. But back here in Nigeria, we seem not just looking that way. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Dr. Kayode, very brief. A friend of mine, an American who lived in Nigeria many years, told me that in a typical public office in Nigeria, when you go there for a service, you are asked, what do you want? Come tomorrow. But similar office in the US, you are normally asked, how may I serve? How can I help you? How can we transform the mentality of public servants towards this service attitude?
Your Excellency, my name is Kumi Vincent, I'm the faculty. I want to ask, the ICT, the computers have been given and all grades. What about the roads, the state of the roads in the state? It's a major concern because I wonder, is that all they need? Because they need, that state has a lot of potentials. But the way, the movement between the Ekiti, Ekiti is such a bad state. Are we doing something about it? Or do you think that will be cured by the computers?
I'm part of the Nigerian diaspora. Thank you very much.
You're part of the
Nigerian diaspora.
Oh, Nigerian diaspora, not the Ekiti diaspora.
I'm the diaspora, so to speak. So, Excellency and the members of the board, my question is two questions right here. How are the press right here interacting with the diaspora press? And everybody knows the guy in New York, the South America. So that's one question. But the other question to you, Mr. Governor, is this. How is your office interacting with the diaspora? Do you have the office of the diaspora? And the reason I ask that is this. I've been around for about 6 weeks to plan the conference coming up in December, the African Diaspora Conference, to engage and build structures. So how do we migrate and come back right here to be part of the development? That's very, very important. Thank you.
The digression. My name is Precious Wenda, I report for the nation's newspapers. They mentioned there that some of the newspapers that are active today are actually dead. I need to clear. Are they dead in terms of? Are they no? He said some of them are actually dead. Are they dead that maybe the political powers or the economic powers have manipulated news stories? Or are they dead in another sense? I need a clarification. Then secondly, if actually it is a fault of the political and the economic powers, how do we redeem it so that the newspapers will perform the actual functions they are supposed to perform?
That was the wrong rendition of my claim. What I said was that I do not spend government money on personal trips. The general impression in Nigeria is that when you are a governor, you are government property. Everything you do, government must be responsible. And I said, for me, when I'm attending to personal issues that may have benefits for government, I still take responsibility for my expenditure. And I didn't say that in all cases, I don't have that kind of resources, so I can't pay for all. Somebody was asking me, and let me ask you that, give you the context. Somebody was asking me why I travel very lightly with one aide when I go abroad. And I said, well, because APC does not have that kind of money to travel with a large retinue of people. So that was the context of that question. Cost of governance, I agree with you that the citizens have a role to play in the improvement of their own quality of lifestyle. But I did not say that Ekiti State offers everything free. We don't have that kind of resources. For example, yes, we offer free education up to senior secondary school level, SS3, but we don't pay for uniform. The parents still get their kids' uniform, they still get their kids. If they're in boarding school, they're responsible for their kids, for the feeding and all that. We're only talking about tuition being free. So parents still do have their responsibility. But we do not think that any child should be deprived of education simply because the parents cannot afford to send the child to school. We think it's a fundamental abuse of that child's human rights. And for us in Ekiti, and for the ideology of my own party, there's no way we can accept that to thrive in the country. So, and I don't think that is what really contributes to the humongous cost of governance that we daily confront in Nigeria. There are other egregious use of money that contribute to that, including the malfeasance that happens in government. So I think, yes, personal responsibility is important, parental care is critical, but government also has a duty in the lives of its citizens. There's a question about the future of our democracy, and I'll just like to say that our democracy is a process. We're not going to get to the end of the journey in one fell swoop. And contemporaneously, when you look at the nature of democratization, the process itself, not democracy, you would see that it's zigzag. It's progress, it's reversal, it's survival, it's improvement. But what we would all prefer, however, is that there is a successive improvement of our own system of democratization. That's what has been lacking. And that is why political science academics would always refer to us with all kinds of epithets: fragile state, dead state, non-performing state, criminal state. You know all those names they call it. It's because it is not functioning in the way we would all like to see. Madam, actually, we really use technology to drive development. Maybe I didn't elaborate enough on what obtains. Everything that you talked about, we've been using technology to improve our social security system, using technology to improve governance. I mean, it's even getting me into trouble because I introduced biometrics for sorting out the wheat from the chaff between our ghost workers who are daily just ripping the state off and those who are genuine workers. We use it in our schools. You talk about the ICT. Of course, we train. The whole point of having a laptop per child policy is that they can jump the hoops and then compete appropriately with their counterparts in other parts of the world, which we have been significantly lacking in Nigeria. So, and we didn't just get laptops. We know we're rural, so we got solar laptops for them so that they can use it when the electricity goes, as we all know, haywire in Nigeria. So technology is not just a fad for us. It is a tool for improving and fast-tracking development in Ekiti State. How can we, yes, Mr. Channels, how can we transform the culture of public service? Well, the only way to transform the culture of public service, as I've enumerated in the lecture, is to involve the citizens actively. you cannot do development to people. You can only do development with people. And what happens there is that we break down the neck of people, we lecture them on what we want to do without allowing the people to take ownership of these ideas and processes that we put in place. So I think that's one of the critical things that we must do. We must demystify government. There's too much myth around leaders in Nigeria. All these excellencies, even you fell into it. You are saying excellency now. It really doesn't add anything to anybody. It's, well, it may be a term of endearment, but in truth, you create a situation in which these guys become so swollen-headed and they think they're the best thing that has happened to this country, and yet they're not different from you. They're probably even smarter than many of us. So it's opportunities. They've had access to opportunities that have not been available to others. That's the difference. And I think let's start with that. All these excellencies and superficial honorifics that you attach to people in public office. And then let's hold them accountable. Let's hold their feet to fire. If you say you're going to do this, people campaign on a platform. And then nobody holds them to account on those platforms. I mean, I campaigned in 2005 that I was going to introduce social security. If I had not introduced it, probably some people, they wouldn't even ask me. I campaigned that I was going to have a laptop on every child's desk. Some people never believed it then, and it's probably a shock to them now, but it really doesn't make much difference. And no matter how well we're doing in states like Ekiti and Lagos and a few other states, if the Nigerian condition remains the way it is, nobody would see the significance of that work going on at the lower level. And yet, we have to contribute our own little to it in the hope that the collective whole will change its own culture, which, for me, is what we need to. It's a change of culture. So allow the people to take ownership. I don't know when last you passed through Ekiti Road, sir. I'm surprised at what you said. I've only been in office in less than 2 years, but I urge you to visit Ekiti and see the roads. All those intra-city roads you're talking about, I think, at the risk of sounding immodest, Ekiti roads are probably the best roads in the country today. And I urge you to go. And it's not propaganda. Just come and look at the internal roads. Even federal roads. I've resorted to fixing federal roads because my people don't know the difference between federal roads and state roads. All they say is governor is not working if the road is not good. So I take responsibility for things that is not even my responsibility, because that's what people want to see. And really, I don't even know what federal roads are. Why we should have federal roads in the first thing. It's a distortion of our federalism. If there are roads to be spent, money to be spent on roads, and federal government wants to contribute, let them contribute it to the states, and let the states be held accountable for fixing those roads. Diaspora, sir. Well, you obviously, I don't think you know me, and it's not important for you to know me. I'm a diaspora. And when I came to run for office in Ekiti, the label was that I was a foreign candidate, which I had to convince my people. I'm not foreign. I went to the secondary school that gentleman went to in the same Ekiti then, so there's nothing foreign about me. But you know, politicians, we tend to draw sorts of distinctions that will give us advantage. So some people formed the Association of Indigenous Candidates because as if I wasn't indigenous. And that's the challenge. It's the reality. If any of us here chooses to go into politics back in their state of origin, they will run into the same problem. The them and not, the exile and indigene, the settler and indigene, all those problems, they're still there. Even when you come from a homogeneous state like mine, there's only one ethnic group in my state. So even not an ethnic group, sub-ethnic and we still confront that. So we do have a diaspora office in Ekiti. And we have somebody that I brought back from the diaspora to head it. And beyond having a diaspora, we also have a database of all our diasporans. As a matter of fact, when I nominated candidates for national honors, the most recent national honors, I nominated one of our most distinguished diasporans, Professor Fumi Olopade, world-renowned oncologist in Chicago, is on the Obama National Cancer Advisory Board. And we nominated her for OON, not just because she's distinguished outside, but because she's been supporting us, she's been working with us at home. So for us, we don't see why we shouldn't take advantage of our diaspora. But we do always advise our diaspora about one thing. When diasporans are returning, it is always important, in fact it's advisable, to drop an imperious toga of teaching local people about what's good in New York, how we do it in London, why you are not intelligent. Because they just shut down. Once you start that, they won't listen to you at all. They won't even give you a chance. Okay, so humility is one good quality to come with when you are from the diaspora. And that way, it's easier to integrate with Nigerians. Because the people you left when you went out, they did not stop where you left them. They've made significant progress themselves. So the notion that they don't know what obtained, the reason why Nigeria is messed up is not because we don't know what goes on outside. I think we've just refused to be part of modernity and to exist in our own cocoon. And that, for me, is the issue we must deal with in restructuring the Nigerian state in order to serve the Nigerian people better. I hope I've answered all the questions. Thank you very much.
If you listen to Dr. Sayo, he described you as a consummate academic and an intellect, and you have proved it in your talk. We thank you earnestly for coming on behalf of the Dean and